Lesson 11, Tuesday, September 6. David, an object lesson in waiting. In 1 Samuel 16:1-13, we see David anointed by Saul as king. However, it was a long journey from the fields of his father Jesse to the throne in Jerusalem. No doubt, at times he felt he was in the midst of a crucible. First, the lad is called to play music to soothe Saul's troubled spirit. 1 Samuel 16. Later, he becomes Israel's hero as he kills Goliath. 1 Samuel 17. Then there are many years during which David is running for his life. Both Saul and his son Jonathan know that David is destined to be the next king. But David does nothing to advance his God-given destiny. In fact, he appears to do the opposite. Even when Saul tries to kill him and David snips a piece of cloth off the king's robe, he wishes he had never done such a thing. Again, when Saul is trying to kill David, David refuses to kill Saul when the opportunity arises. 1 Samuel 26:1-11 says, In the time the men of Ziph came to Saul at Gibeah, saying, Is David not hiding on the hills of Keilah, facing Jeshimon? So Saul rose up and went down to the wilderness of Ziph with 3,000 chosen men of Israel to look for David in the wilderness of Ziph. Saul camped on the hill of Keilah, which faces Jeshimon by the road. David was then living in the wilderness, and he learned that Saul had come into the wilderness after him. So David sent spies to verify that Saul had indeed come. David later went to the place where Saul had encamped, and David saw the place where Saul and Abner the son of Ner, the chief of his army, were lying asleep. Saul lay asleep in the camp enclosure with the troops camping all around him. Then David said to Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai the son of Zeruiah, the brother of Joab, Who will go down with me into the camp to Saul? Abishai replied, I will go down with you. So David and Abishai made their way to the troops by night, and they found Saul lying asleep in the camp enclosure with his spear stuck in the ground next to his head. Abner and the troops were lying all around him. Abishai now said to David, Today God has surrendered your enemy into your hands, and now please let me pin him to the ground with the spear just once, and I will not need to do it twice. However, David said to Abishai, Do not harm him, for who can lift his hands against the anointed of Jehovah and remain innocent? David continued, As surely as Jehovah is living, Jehovah himself will strike him down, or his day will come, and he will die, or he will go down into battle and perish. It is unthinkable from Jehovah's standpoint for me to lift my hand against the anointed of Jehovah. So now, take, please, the spear next to his head and the water jug, and let us be on our way. Why does David refuse to kill Saul? What principles does this teach us about the way God brings about his plans for our lives? Now let's read 1 Samuel 26:12-25. And it says, So David took the spear and the water jug from next to Saul's head, and they went away. No one saw or noticed them or woke up, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from Jehovah had fallen upon them. Then David crossed to the other side and stood on the top of the mountain some distance away, with a considerable space between them. David called out to troops and to Abner the son of Ner, saying, Abner, will you not answer? Abner answered, Who are you who calls the king? David said to Abner, Are you not a man, and who is like you in Israel? So why do you not keep watch over your lord the king? For one of the soldiers came in to do away with your lord the king. What you have done is not good, and surely as Jehovah is living, you deserve to die because you have not kept watch over your lord, the anointed of Jehovah. Now look around. Where are the king's spear and the water jug that were next to his head? Then Saul recognized the voice of David and said, Is this your voice, my son David? And David replied, It is my voice, my lord the king. He added, Why is my lord chasing after his servant? For what have I done, and what am I guilty of? My lord the king, please listen to the words of his servant. If it is Jehovah who incited you against me, let him accept my grain offering. But if men have incited you, they are cursed because they have driven me away today from being united with God's inheritance, saying, Go serve other gods. And now, do not let my blood fall to the ground away from the presence of God, for the king of Israel has gone out to look for a single flea, as if he were chasing a partridge on the mountains. In turn, Saul said, I have sinned. Come back, my son David, for I will do you no more harm, because you regarded my life as precious this day. Yes, I have acted foolishly and have made a terrible mistake. David answered, Here is the spear of the king. Let one of your young men come over and take it. It is Jehovah who will repay each one for his own righteousness and his own faithfulness. For today Jehovah gave you into my hand, but I was unwilling to lift my hand against the anointed of the Lord. Look, just as your life was precious to me this day, so may my life be precious in the eyes of God, and may he rescue me out of all distress. Saul replied to David, May you be blessed, my son David. You will surely do great things, and you will surely prevail. Then David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place. How does David's refusal to kill Saul affect Saul? What does this teach us about the advantages of waiting for God? Looking at the whole of David's road to the throne, we could perhaps summarize it in a short sentence. Don't grab what God has not yet given. God's gifts are always best received from his hand and in his time. This may require a very long time of waiting. Bean sprouts may literally grow up within hours, while an oak tree will take many years. But when the strong winds come, the tree will not be uprooted. Think about how easily David could have justified killing Saul. After all, David was told he'd have the throne, and Saul was so evil anyway. Yet, his actions speak of true faith in God. What conclusion might you be able to draw from this example for yourself in light of whatever you might be waiting for? From the book Patriarchs and Prophets, page 668 and 672, it says, Hidden by the deep shadows of the hills, David and his attendant entered the encampment of the enemy. As they sought to ascertain the exact number of their foes, they came upon Saul sleeping, his spear stuck in the ground and a cruse of water in his head. Beside him lay Abner, his chief commander, and all around them were the soldiers locked in slumber. Abishai raised his spear and said to David, God hath delivered thine enemy into thine hand this day. Now therefore let him, and let me smite him, I pray thee. He waited for the word of permission, but there fell upon his ear the whispered words from David, Destroy him not. For who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As the Lord liveth, the Lord shall smite him, or his day shall come to die, or he shall descend into battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should stretch forth my hand against the Lord's anointed. The second instance of David's respect for his sovereign life made a still deeper impression upon the mind of Saul, and brought from him a more humble acknowledgment of his faults. He was astonished and subdued at the manifestation of such kindness. And parting from David, Saul exclaimed, Blessed be thou, my son David. Thou shalt both do great things, and also shalt still prevail. But the son of Jesse had no hope that the king would long continue this frame of mind. God bless.